What split your life into before and after? Story 1. When I was 22, I dropped out of college, moved back in with my parents in Missouri, and was miserable and depressed and high all the time. A very angry and bitter person. One night, my buddy and I blacked out on lean and woke up to a text from a landlord asking if our move-in date next week was still okay. Turns out we had signed a 6-month lease in Fairplay, Colorado. We packed everything we owned in my car and drove out there. I ended up living there 6 years as a ski bum and met the best friends I've ever had in my life, which led to thousands of incredible experiences and made me into a completely different person. I am so proud of where I am today and who I have become. Story 2. The day my brother died, Deck 6, 2018 edit to add, we were in a car accident. Though the worst of the accident was on my side of the car, I was wearing a seatbelt, my brother was not. Story 3. My mother's death. Lost my father and all grandparents by 16. Was my mom's caregiver for 3 years. That happened at 23 years old. I'm 33 now. And if I could go back in time, take the hospitals, offer grievance counseling. It's not even though I'm sad 'cause mom died. It's that trauma has come out in other ways that never had expected and had somewhat ruined my future in life. If your hospital offers free grievance counseling and secondary counseling after the loss of a loved one, take it. I wish I did. Story 4. The death of my fiancé. Edit, I feel like I should add that it will be 21 years this November. He was killed in action in Iraq in 2004. I'm happily married to a wonderful man and living an exceptional life. Grief that profound changes you. There's a definite delineation of before and after for me. Story 5. The death of my wife. We first met, me 19, she 18. We had 40 years, 8 days together, 2 kids and 1 grand. I now have 2 sometime over the 40 years he and she became we, a single unit us. Now, it's just me. That's what split my life into before and after. It's been 312 years and I still haven't figured out the after part. Story 6. When my parents got divorced. Before that, everything felt pretty normal and stable. And after, it was like I had to grow up way faster than I wanted to. It changed how I saw family, relationships, and even myself. Story 7. A relationship with a narcissist. I'm not the same person anymore. It destroyed my life as I knew it and literally changed my brain chemistry and the way I view the world. Story 8. Since it's only sad stories, I thought I'd share a good one for change. Met my boyfriend, soon-to-be husband, some 2 years ago. Moved in after the first date, and he changed my whole life for the better. Never had a relationship this meaningful with a person, so this is my before and after. Story 9. Getting diagnosed with ADHD, and finally starting medication and cognitive behavioral therapy. Split my life into a clear before and after. For the first time, things started to make sense. I wasn't just lazy, unmotivated, or broken. I had a framework, the right tools, and the chemical support to start untangling the chaos in my head. From that point on, everything began to shift. I went through a gastric sleeve surgery, something I put off for years. I stopped coasting and started making real choices about the direction of my life. I quit a job that was draining the life out of me, even though it meant taking a pay cut, and found work that actually gives me purpose. I started prioritizing my own mental sanity, not as a luxury, but as a necessity. Since then, it's been a constant process of rebuilding, reframing, and figuring out what life can actually look like when you're no longer just surviving. The after version of me is still in progress, but at least now I'm steering the ship. Story 10. Getting hit by a car. Woke up in a hospital a month later with casts on my legs, many fractures, and a damaged brain. Spent most of a year in a brain injury rehab hospital. Fortunately recovered well, and returned to my life, though it was a bit different. That was almost 8 years ago. So far, so good. Story 11. Surviving a car crash and losing my mom and granddad to it. Definitely feels like my life split into 2 there. Almost like this is a different life that I'm living now, and the one before the crash is just in another world, from a different timeline, just distant and inaccessible and hazy like a dream. Story 12. My dad is my best friend, my absolute hero in life, my absolute best, made since I was old enough to follow him around. Early onset dementia that progressed rapidly, and everything changed. I miss my friend, and now life is before and now. Story 13. My life was definitely cut into before and after the death of my only daughter, 24, at Christmas in a car accident. Now, I live in 2 dimensions, here and behind the veil, from where she's protecting me. I only have to stand my ground here on earth till the time comes, and then we will be together again. Story 14. Prenatal diagnosis of Down syndrome and a heart defect at 19 weeks. I was only 25 years old. I'm 39 now. She's 13 and we're best friends. It all worked out, but has been and continues to be life-altering. Story 15. My sister being killed in the Hunter Valley bus crash. The only Victorian to die in the crash. So not just lost my sister, but got all the media scrounging around. Life definitely feels different now. Story 16. Organizing a file drawer. My part-time job as a receptionist. I was nervous that my boss and business owner would be angry with me because I didn't ask permission first and use my own judgment, but she noticed immediately and praised me. Nothing huge, just, "Oh, wow. Thank you, this looks great," kind of thing. Doesn't sound like something that would split someone's life into before and after, but at the time I was in my early 20s and had just dropped out of the local community college. I struggled massively in high school and barely graduated. ID basically accepted that I was low-key stupid and not capable of intentional success. The comment my boss made that day was like a small pebble rolling down a hill and triggering a rock slide. I began taking initiative, tackling challenges, and becoming confident in my ability to problem solve. I secretly began to suspect I might be smart after all. Within a few years, I was managing the practice my boss owned. I went back to school and re-enrolled in classes I had failed, developing study strategies that worked for me. It wasn't smooth sailing, but I never again doubted myself or thought of myself as stupid. I graduated from community college and went on to get my bachelor's degree. I just turned 40. I have an amazing husband, kids, and a career earning in the mid-six figures. 2 years ago, I was diagnosed with severe ADHD, which explains so much. I'll always be grateful to my old boss for giving me that super tiny, super insignificant compliment that pivoted my life in such a minor yet life-altering way. Her implicit belief in me and my potential was a paradigm shift in my life, and I don't think she'll ever understand how much of a difference it made. Story 17, a 3-year period of born-again Christianity, absolutely destroyed my mental and physical health in a way that makes me shocked it was so brief and so long ago. Story 18 has happened 3 times in my life, having a baby, then again, when I became a single mom 6 years after that then lockdown. I feel like the whole world has shifted. Story 19, when my husband left me and our 5-month-old baby for his mistress. We haven't seen or heard from him since we discovered the cheating. He never made any effort to fix things or be involved in our son's life. I blocked all his numbers and social media accounts. I finally feel at peace, no longer burdened by the constant worry of whether he's cheating. Good riddance indeed. Story 20, sobriety. If you're struggling, just ask for help from anyone you know who also got sober. It's that simple to get the ball rolling, and when you're in it, it is impossible to conceive of the incredibly positive life you can live once you start putting the building blocks to recovery in place. Story 21, transitioning. The before time was all barely contained depression weighing on me like an overstuffed pack of all my fears and insecurity as I trudged through life's hardships with little motivation, any moment expecting the next straw to break me, after I feel amazing, like I put down that entire back-breaking load, and no, there's a better way. My life itself is just as hard and complicated, maybe more so, but the weight off my shoulders makes it so I see the value in sticking around and working through all, and I'm so much happier and optimistic as a person. I have friends again, a love of my life, and a future, and it all happened because I stopped forcing myself to fit the specific gender box I was dealt and to be true to me. Story 22, migraines, which occurred daily, were significantly debilitating and have caused impairment to my cognitive functions. Thankfully, after 3 years of trial and error with medications and other treatments, I'm down to 2 to 3 incapacitating migraine a week versus the original 7. Story 23, being diagnosed at 8 years old with chronic pancreatitis. Realizing that the abuse I went through wasn't my fault, and I was better than allowing it to control my present and future. The births of all 3 of my babies, the death of my 3rd baby from SIDS, the recent death of my mother after 5 dedicated years of caregiving for her. Story 24-1, dad's death at 13-2, moving to a different country at 14-3, older brother's death at 17-4, becoming agnostic atheist, and drinking alcohol in a Muslim country and household at 20, am already dead R&I. Story 25, gaining over 100 pounds over medical issues. I realized who my friends were who liked me for my looks and my family's treatment of me. I completely isolated myself from everyone for years and went into depression, missed a lot of opportunities due to my self-esteem and self-worth issues. Story 26, without a doubt, going from a happy marriage, my view, to a bad marriage, his view overnight, practically after being married almost 30 years. Cheaters don't only cheat, they are cruel and say the most terrible things to justify their actions. So karma, have at it. Story 27, the first one was my grandma. Let me tell you, Christmas and Thanksgiving were her holidays. She went all out and made a magical time after she died. So did the holidays. My mom died in 2021, though. My entire life changed after that. Before, I had interests and hobbies, but after, it's like everything lost its shine. Story 28, came here thinking about my sister. Forever 13 scrolling through all I see for answers is my mom, dad, sister, brother, the amount of lost loved ones. I struggle with depression. But this post hushed my demons. If I left, I could be one of these stories that change someone's life forever. I don't want to be a turning point in a loved one's life. I don't want to do this to them. Story 29, I put it in these terms, BC and AD, before COVID, and after Donald, then the SOB gets reelected. Now it may be living in the United States or in Trumpistan. Story 30, meeting my now husband. My life was pretty tough before I met him, had a shitty youth and everything, but my luck kind of turned when I met him 15 years ago. Story 31, Virginia Tech shooting, 2007. I was a student and 4 friends were murdered that day. There's a before and after me. I'm okay now, with lots of therapy and stuff, maybe a better me. But there's def a before and after. Story 32, my 3rd kid. Pushed the limit a bit too far. Got the snip. 2 is good. Family past 2 adults, 2 kids, divide and conquer 1 kid, each the 3rd, is just chaos and thrown out the balance. Story 33, my son's suicide. I went into 3 or 4 directions. Been too long for me to still be going through it. First was divorce. 2nd, got remarried, good thing. 3rd was increased alcohol consumption. 4th was slowly losing my mind. Finally coming to the realization that I have lost my mind due to the drinking and depression, and am looking at losing everything. Thankfully, I have enough saved up in retirement and savings to make it for a while when I finally self-destruct. Story 34, SA. I buried the trauma in my mind and forgot it for about 15 years until I found out I was very sick and my brain needed all the room in my head to deal with my medical issues, and it came rising to the surface. Lots of therapy showed me ID, never truly forgotten, and I saw how my life changed at 19 when the essay happened. I learned just how powerful our minds can be and how trauma affects your body, mentally and physically. Story 35, I answered this in another thread before, but it seemed to help a lot of people. So here it goes, death of my 5-month pregnant wife and unborn child just 2 months ago. We were inseparable from when she was 18 until she passed at 33. Life changed a full 180 degrees. For context, we did 2 rounds of IVF, and it took 3 years for it to finally be successful. Her pregnancy was extremely rough, as there was rarely a day where she wasn't sick, but we were both so excited since we knew it would be worth it. Fast forward to October 2024, she's having bad stomach pains, so we went to the ER. Almost immediately, they told us the 3 words that will haunt me forever. There's no heartbeat. Tragically, this was the last thing my wife heard before she had to be intubated, and so the nightmare began. She fought for 5 days with family by her side. She ultimately passed from sepsis, pancreatitis, leg infections, and finally full organ failure. She was an organ donor, but nothing could be saved. Her funeral was beautiful, but it was obviously a near impossible day. The community all came together and supported me more than I could have imagined, and I'll forever be grateful for that. If you take anything from my story, please just pamper your wives and hold your little ones extra tight. Story 36, stroke, all for the better. I simply could not talk. Some folks thought that was a blessing. In the hospital with 30 minutes, ICU for 4 days because I was given the decision as to whether or not to take a treatment called TPA. I recommend it. Physical and language therapy followed. So did life changes at 7:04, and I'm on the stationary bike. 1 5-mile walk to follow every day. Story 37, losing 85 pounds. The before was an unhealthy and unhappy life. The after came with a healthier lifestyle that improved much more than just physical health. Story 38, kidney failure at 29. Did dialysis for a few years and received a transplant. It was a new lease on life and the second part of the journey. 58 now and still going strong. Story 39, assault the day. My brother died. My brother held a farewell party for his friends to go study abroad in a few days, and then a truck took everything away. Story 40, moving to a small town in hideous Oklahoma from my city life in a more beautiful state, tore my family into pieces. We all became depressed, and my parent turned to meth. Story 41, my double hip replacements. I'm a 38-year-old runner and found out about my bad hips in June 2024. I had my first replacement in September and my second in March. 6 months before that, my mom died. So actually probably just this whole 5 to 2 year period. Story 42, COVID pandemic as a whole. And then shortly after the horrible death and betrayal of my then boyfriend, the latter was so traumatic and crazy that you couldn't write book, make a movie about it because people would say that it's too unrealistic. I honestly don't feel like the same person anymore. Story 43, solo traveling, which I've been doing for 2 years now. It has changed me for the better, made me a braver, more independent person, opened my eyes to the world. Before I was just a girl who dreamed a lot, but didn't have the courage to go for what I wanted. Now I know if I want something, I'll make it happen. Story 44, when I got COVID back in 2023, I was and still am a college student, but back then I was full-time, taking gym classes, staying, and on track for graduating within 4 years. Then in my junior fall semester 2023, I got COVID, and it messed me up. I got long COVID and MECFS. Junior year, I passed 2 classes. The rest I had to medically withdraw from. I had to cut back on my hours at work too. I'm still recovering. I walk with a cane and can't function after 3 p.m. If I overexert myself, I get sick. It's hard, but I'm proud to say that my senior year, I passed all my classes. Sadly, due to my junior year, I have to extend my graduation date by 2 years, spring 2027, but that's fine. I'm proud of myself, and I'm staying strong. I'm so lucky to have my support system in my mom and brother, and I know he'll get that diploma. Story 45, before my divorce from my ex-wife, I was a completely different person. After my divorce, I became an all-around different man, and it was noticeable by those around me. Story 46, almost dying due to a suicide attempt. It wasn't the first time, but I truly wanted to end it, and my father said something that shook me. You got to stop that. Either you leave or you try to heal, but you can't keep going like this. At first, I was hurt, but now I realize what he meant. From there, I really tried. I'm still trying to heal today, but I stopped thinking about dying 2 years ago. I'm on the right path. Story 47, my cats. I adopted a litter of 3 kittens on August 1st, 2020. They'll be 5 at the end of this month, according to the vet's best guess. I'm grateful for them every day. There are more serious before-afters in my life, but they're my absolute favorite. It's hard to imagine a life before them. Story 48, cliche as it sounds, but high school. Think within the next year and a half after HS, I was falling into depression for the first time, and it's been an on and off journey since then. Story 49, transitioning. Pre-transition, I was focused on getting my life in order and succeeding solo, no kids speak. Finally got my house, and since I was in a safe place, I started the transition process that had been growing in the back of my mind for a decade and a half. Psychiatrists couldn't agree on what was going on with my mood, but gender-affirming care wasn't in their toolkit, so they treated it like it didn't exist and wouldn't consider that route. So I was taking a few mental health medicines and medicines to treat the side effects of the mental health medicines. Since HRT, I have a lot more to look forward to and work on. Worked off of the mental health meds with no ill effect. Turns out the mood stuff was gender dysphoria, and the DRS I was seeing wouldn't even consider that as a possible diagnosis. Mood has never been better. Pre-transition, I think there were 2 times in my life that I genuinely laughed so hard I cried and or couldn't talk. Since transitioning, that is a weekly occurrence. Still a lot to do, and even in this current administration, I have a positive outlook on everything. I typically don't post about transitioning in non-trans subreddits. Let's see what kind of response, if any, I get from the AskReddit crowd. Story 50, marriage. Everything changed for the better, and I've never looked back. To have someone who believes in you and has your back made all the difference. Story 51, the gym. I grew up with an emotionally and verbally abusive bully of a single parent. I struggled with self-esteem and self-confidence for a long time. I was gifted as a kid and way underperformed in life. I started powerlifting at 36, and it gave me the confidence to go back to school at 38 and start a career in tech at just before 40. I was driving a forklift. Now I am a DevOps engineer. Story 52, more like broke up my family, but my sister dying from an overdose. None of us knew she even used heroin, and the only reason she got into drug use was because my mom was an addict. There is strong speculation that my sister got the heroin from my mom, but my mom swears otherwise. She claimed the drugs as hers to get a plea deal, and she is known to not tell the truth. Because of this, many people blame her for my sister's death. My youngest sister won't speak to her and constantly and repeatedly badmouths her on social media. Myself am somewhere in the middle. I love my mom, but I do believe my sister had a better chance of being here today if my mom hadn't had such a bad influence on us. I moved away before I could get involved in any of it. My youngest sister met a man and had children, which pulled her out of the life. I still talk to my mom, but it's nowhere near how it used to be. There's anger and resentment that I'm worried about letting out because my mom has already attempted suicide before. It's a mess now. The family no longer exists. My dad died 6 months after my sister, and everyone is angry or hurt at one another. I hate living this way, but it is what it is. Story 53, quitting dope. I had to drop all my friends and get new ones. I don't even hang around the same type of people. Some of my music TV choices had to change. I take showers nearly every day now. I don't steal anymore. So far, I returned every wallet cell phone I found. I seek to understand rather than be understood as a default now. The list goes on. Story 54, I grew up in a far-right religious movement and left when I turned 18. I really can't even imagine being thrown into that environment again. It's been 10 years since then, but there's such a stark difference now being in the world that I was isolated from for so long. It feels like it was a dream sometimes because some of my experiences, they were so bonkers. Story 55, me realizing I'm trans. I just feel like a completely different person now from who I was before then, and it just feels weird imagining a world where I never realized and I just kept going on not knowing forever, and that just sounds so depressing. So I'm very happy I realized it all. Story 56, large part of my 20s where I wasted some years on a religious cult. Managed to make it out of the maze and rebuild my life, but holy the damage it leaves mentally takes years to process. Story 57, finding out my daughter had an incompatible with life condition, anencephaly at 20 weeks, went from picking out baby names to getting the most devastating news of my whole life in the span of 1 minute. Story 58, I was raised in the Mormon church, full send, Eagle Scout, for years of seminary and high school, 2-year mission in Argentina. Went to college at BYU. I left the church after I graduated college when I was 23 and haven't looked back. It's been 13 years since I stopped, and my childhood feels like a hallucination at this point. Story 59 for me. It was the military, going to Iraq. I was a young kid that grew up in an upper-middle-class family. Had it made after I went to Iraq and saw the death and destruction that humans can cause. My world was changed forever. Once you see things, you can't just unsee them. People in America were living very comfortable lives, and Iraq was torn to pieces. Death everywhere. I call it the Wild West, because that's what it reminds me of. When I went over there, there was no police, no rule of law. People can pretty much do what they wanted to do. Story 60, my sister's death. Before, I was a workaholic with a big mortgage, important job, grinding day in, day out, just like her. After, chucked it all 9 months later and live in the Caribbean, in a rented house with a pool where I spend most of my days. Story 61, an abusive relationship. I had never known it was possible for a single human to be so cruel and evil to another human being, and experiencing the abuse definitely split my life into before and after. I feel like a totally different person now. I lost myself for a while and felt like an empty shell of my former self at times too. I'm with a man now who treats me amazingly well and wants nothing more than to see me happy. So I'm doing much better now. Story 62. I have at least 3 that I can think of. My parents' divorce. My dad took me out to dinner my first week in university to tell me they were having issues. I had thought the dinner was to be a celebration of my being adult, but no. The next few years were horrendous, trying to support my younger siblings and navigate the new normal, often at the sacrifice of myself, my time, life experiences, money, too much on one so young who was also a child of the relationship, pregnancy, and subsequent implosion of the relationship I mistakenly thought was for the rest of my life. Making the decision to terminate, despite having wanted to be a parent, cleave me in two. I live in a country where it was illegal, so having to travel and be treated like a criminal at such a vulnerable time in my life wounded my soul to a degree where I don't know it'll ever recover. Shame is toxic. My subsequent suicide attempt was life-defining. Waking up and thinking of how my not being around would have impacted my younger brother made me determined to live. The clarity I felt was impactful. I didn't want to live with the pain, but I wanted to live. Secondary infertility and IVF. Wanted to be pregnant, and not being able to have a child ransacked my sanity. Going through fertility treatment and my body remembering the trauma of the abortion of years past put me through the ringer. The body does indeed hold the score. Making the decision to not move forward with more treatment and accepting my child-free state was a life-defining moment. My last birthday, a new chapter in life, and deciding to be happy. Story 63, stage 4 cancer diagnosis, BC as we now call it. I have chemo every other week. I've had 52 rounds so far, cancer directly in the buttocks, being diagnosed with diabetes. My life is split into the first half when I thought I was invincible and the world was a bright place, and the second half when I suffer from anxiety and am constantly paranoid that my body will try to sabotage me in some other way one day. Story 64, psychedelic mushroom therapy. Before I was an extremely depressed person with a grim outlook on my life and future. After I am incredibly filled with joy, 247, always feeling the positives in any situation, absurdly optimistic about any and everything happening in my life, completely devoid of depression. Story 65, my wedding. My family were so emotionally abusive towards me and my husband. My sister ran off with the remaining guests to the bar where my sister-in-law worked while I was in the bathroom, snorted cocaine, and publicly my sister-in-law's boyfriend there. Everyone was furious with me for being angry and disgusted. They spread fake rumors around my friends that my husband was abusive to take the attention off my disgusting sister. I realized I was signing my husband up for a lifetime of abuse if I let the dynamic continue and cut my immediate family off. I lost literally every relative because nobody in the entire family will speak to me until I fix things. The knowledge that not one person in my family gives about me really destroyed my self-worth. My husband and his family are amazing, though. Story 66, I kind of have two. One is the impact to my head that seems to have resulted in the bouts of vertigo and complete loss of equilibrium I now live with on a daily basis. You really don't understand how much you take simply being able to balance properly for granted until you can't anymore. Two is a near-death experience. You really get a completely different perspective in life when you look the Reaper in the face but don't take his hand. Story 67, I went through major health issues after being pulled off the medication mirtazapine for sleep. Like it's year 3, and I'm so much better, but the WDs were horrendous, and it messed up my nervous system and health. I remember it before, and now. It's after. Story 68, Hurricane Katrina in New Orleans for me. I was 28 years old, and finally feeling like my life was where I wanted it to be. That hurricane took everything and every memory that I owned, 9 feet of water and house. And then the roof collapsed. When I was able to make it back 3 weeks later, there was nothing. My parents, grandparents, girlfriend, co-workers, everyone lost everything. I still have crushing memories of my grandparents sobbing in the muddy yard, hysterically crying, and realizing everything was gone. I had never had the feeling like a giant reset button had been pressed before. It was really hard. Many of us here in NOLA were never the same afterwards. There's always a before and after Katrina question that many of us here still ask. Story 69, my wife got long COVID POTS, chronic fatigue. Before, when we could actually go out and enjoy nature and do things, we had started doing indoor climbing after when she needs to nap half the weekend and doing grocery shopping wears her out. We've seen a COVID specialist and a rheumatologist. Nothing works. She genuinely feels like it's stolen years of her life. Story 70, parental alienation. It ripped my mind, heart, and soul out of me. Everything had to be rebuilt my entire life. Now that I weathered the storm, I realize it can be flipped to a positive. Take my first 40 years of life experience and recreate myself. The rebirth. I have 2 options now. 1, operate with vengeance, or 2, double down on the values of peace, love, and happiness. I get to decide. Story 71, breakup from a long-term relationship high school sweetheart. We were together for 9 years, had a second or first real TBH coming of age phase after that, and finally found myself under everything that was suppressed by ESP, in the end, really harmful relationship. Story 72, a solo trip to Barbados from Australia. There's an interesting energy in that part of the world. Miami, too, made me more bold, less fearful. I took control of my life, no longer a passenger. Story 73, I think a lot of trans people would say they have a specific moment when they came out to someone close to them, a close friend, a family member, or a partner. I do have those. I celebrate my man-niversary on the 20th of November, but I think the clearer division I have is when my female self finally left. To make a horrific story short, I had to hide from a bunch of lads threatening to beat me up and kill me. Over cat ears, of all things, which I hadn't worn for over 2 years at that point, but I digress. It was the longest and most terrifying 45 minutes of my life, just waiting for them to go away. I had only come out to close friends and family at the time. I think my mom had told her parents about a week before, but it made me realize that the world would not wait for me to be ready. Either I come out now, or never. I left without a scratch, but it still felt like my past self had died. It took me another year and a bit to come out to everyone, mostly because the lads threatening me were from a neighboring school, and I was scared about what they'd do if they found out I was trans. So school was the last thing I checked off the list, but I officially came out to everyone in September 2023, and I'm not looking back. I'm still getting abuse over the cat ears, though you'd think they'd come up with something new to talk about after 6 years.